I would like to introduce Dr. Sarah Kern, who is also a part of the illustrious planning committee that helped put this together and is a very well-known scholar in migration, who will be moderating this panel and introducing our panelists.
Welcome, everybody, and look forward to everyone joining us who's still out in the hallway. What I'd like to do is ask each of the panelists to share with us something about how their biography has connected them to the ideas around the role of technology and social media in relation to anti-human trafficking or the promotion of human trafficking. Later, we're going to ask them some questions about what are the major challenges associated with technology and social media, and then we'll turn to asking what are some possibilities? How can we use technology and social media to combat trafficking?
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Margaret Meg. I'm an intel analyst working with the FBI here in Seattle.
My journey is a little bit different than that, and I certainly didn't think I'd be sitting here as state senator, because I've lived in my community and worked with kids and families all my life. And so my journey really started working with 11 to 21-year-old pregnant and married teens in Tacoma a long time ago for middle school young people. And then I did comprehensive sex ed bill because young people need to know about their bodies, and they need to know about affirmative consent, and they need to know about who they are and how they walk this world and what it looks like to be taken advantage of. And the fact is, so many of our young people have never been able to say no, so how can they say yes and the opposite? And as we talk about this, and we have schools that don't want and are not using cell phones and don't want them and banning them in schools, we may be doing a very disservice to our young people rather than having them understand and figure out what it means to utilize those tools in the right way.
Hi everyone, my name is Janine Vance, and before I introduce myself, I have a question for everyone here. How many people here have ever thought about adopting a child? Now, how many people here want to adopt a stolen or kidnapped child? Oh, no takers?
No.
Okay, I ask because adoption trafficking happens more often than you can imagine, and it impacts not just the adoptive parents with high fees. Right now, a child from South Africa can generate $65,000. A child from South Korea generates $62,000 currently, and children from China, Philippines, even the United States can be as high as $45,000. Many of these adoptions were actually a severe human rights violation and illegal, and that some of the adoption documents are actually fraudulent and even made up and false. And it's not just South Korea, it's actually worldwide.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about what about technology facilitated, what about technology is facilitating trafficking?
Okay, so before social media and technology, children were obtained using trafficking methods that probably aren't as coercive as they are today. Like more in the past, they were blatantly kidnapped off the streets of, say, India or every continent. And even there were networks of priests, nuns, and doctors and nurses that would process children. They would actually tell the mother that her child was stillborn after giving birth, and then process the child for adoption. In fact, in 2011, there were about 300,000 cases that were being examined by the Spanish government. So back in the past, that way. But today, now, in the case of adoption trafficking, anybody can set up a adoption website or a crisis pregnancy website. And once a vulnerable mother who does not or has a moment of self-doubt to her capabilities, she might actually insert her information. And mothers like that might be a little bit more trusting to these websites because they profess to help the mother. And they might give their phone number and their address and more information than what you would typically give to any website out there. And then after that, the perpetrator actually has this information that they can text the victim, the targeted victim, and they can send daily messages 24/7 professing help and care for the mom. And it's very deceptive. And so not only does the perpetrator have access to the mom, but anywhere she takes her phone, she can receive these text messages that says, if you sign this contract, we'll give you a phone, we'll give you a laptop, we'll give you a gift basket. I mean, these are actual gifts that pregnant mothers are, tempted with. And so these deceptive websites is a huge problem within the adoption trafficking scene.
So the main issues that are in my learning that I typically are mostly around content moderation. So it's a big problem. I think for a lot of not on social media in particular, it's really all of them. That's something that a lot of us struggle with, and that's something that obviously for us and seeing being able to work with cases and identify victims that can be difficult. And then another point is social media ads for labor trafficking. I know there was an interesting article about people advertising through social media, like in-home care, particularly for in-home child care or things like that. And they're really targeting vulnerable people to come and do that work, and then the person gets there and it turns into a trafficking situation that they can't get out of it. Those are kind of some big issues, I think, I see at least in
Again, the experts are to my left and to my right, but one of the things I've been able to do is to support implement recommendations that come from the Washington State Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And unfortunately, still pushing those bills through. Did the first one in 2022 and got it all the way through the Senate, and it didn't make it to and through the House because there was an issue with the title. So dropped it in 23-24, which was just last session. And it was a short session, only 60 days, and neither version made it out of committee just because there were so many other things that we were trying to deal with. So I'm certain we're going to see that come back, especially again as we continue to think about digital citizenship and data literacy and the importance of place. And just not that ability to think forward and understand. And their job is to practice and try things on, and unfortunately, the things that are out there in front of them are much more dangerous perhaps than they used to be. So we'll continue to make those recommendations come to light, and need to also have 98 folks in the House and the other 48 members of Senate agree that it's improving through.
Just the day that I was asked to be on this panel, my sister, who is the admin of one of the adoption groups that we established, got a post request that said, "Hello everyone, we've got babies available and ready to go out.
What?
Message me directly if interested, thanks." And typically in adoptive parent groups, they're very trusting, everybody loves adoption, there's not really any questions asked. But of course, because we run a group with adult adoptees who are annoyed and families separated by adoption, and
to what other, maybe your own experiences or your own questions about this topic on the challenges of technology and social media. And we'll get some responses from the panelists. And then we'll turn to some questions and comments around possibilities. So does anybody have some comments or questions or?
I was kind of curious to learn about how dating apps and the lack of, it seems to me, granted, I don't know all of the points, but that's usually what I'm interested in. I've noticed that dating apps seem to lack a lot of regulation around protecting people who utilize them from not only possible traffickers, multiple crimes, multiple accounts, and they are not blocked from any of these. So regulations, things like that, all of that. Sorry, that's not a very well-formed question, but I hope that makes sense.
That's a great question, though, because anyone can open up accounts, and if that's blocked, you just open up another one.
The net nannies thing has been going on through, but that's more focused on individuals who are seeking young women and emerging young women, if you will. I don't know. We're going to have to chat about that.
Let's put that on I think this is something, actually we should have a task force on this.
The detective,
because the internet is everywhere, and it affects every single transaction, relational piece, and I don't think we have a comprehensive, I think you just identified one area in which we don't have regulation that would provide someone like Margaret with, I just have to project. Okay. But it seems like, for someone like Margaret, she needs enforcement tool. She needs some kind of enforcement tool that is facilitated by a regulation or a law, and she doesn't yet have one, as far as I can tell, with regards to tracking and putting some kind of enforcement around not allowing somebody like that to keep signing up for a dating app as obviously a predator.
On the behest of, so each company would have to
the
put that
mic,
in effect,
he
right?
needs the mic.
Okay, oh, sorry.
Yeah, each company would have to be, taking kind of stock of their own company and putting that effect themselves. So obviously, unfortunately, company kind of can't do that. But that's a great question.
I can project, so you can, and then I can project.
So I was just curious. So since AI is a huge usage for social media and technology for nowadays, AI is able to create images in just seconds, right? So do you believe that using AI to spread awareness about human trafficking is appropriate? If not, then what is the proper action in order to educate and inform and also to spread awareness about through technology and social media?
Right. I think that's a great question. We're going to do that in a little bit. I'm going to hold that and I'll lead with that. And then we'll make sure that. So let's talk about technology challenges first, and then we can talk about maybe are there solutions through AI. Yeah.
My question is also AI related, but it is more from a challenge perspective, and I just wanted to piggyback on this question right now. We generally tend to get very excited about new technologies, solving all social problems very quickly, and that's a trap that has backfired, especially in gender work, in social inclusion work, especially things like violence against women and girls, intimate partner violence and such. However, big companies that are working on these AI models and large language models, there is an inherent lack of inclusion in people that are doing this work. Like there is a systemic issue, which is why most often results of these new technologies are highly racialized. They normalize a lot of discriminatory norms and challenges. I don't know if this is a question, if it's a fair question to ask, but if you have any thoughts on how to
engage with the system that's actually building these technologies, which can be very useful for social good, to be inclusive and then be able to really resolve some of these issues.
Okay, that's a good question. Are there any other challenges or problems that somebody would like to raise before we turn to answering, like, how can we use AI to better the world?
I was really interested in the examples, like the slow, catchy phrases that we have to attract people related to adoption trafficking was, and then it led me think about the images we can see when we search internet, right? So I was just thinking, well, that was a very obvious kind of example where we can be suspicious about, well, this social media sounds wrong. But there are other cases where we encounter every day through our search engines where we get these images, even like blog posts or like posts out there that are slightly, it's hard to tell whether it is really related to human trafficking or are there are these nuances in a way. So I wonder if there are any cases that you have encountered or any examples that are related to that.
Great. That's great. Let's turn now. Maybe you can offer some reactions to that. But I think maybe we should think about some solutions and what I'm thinking about is cyber. So just like in the last session, somebody mentioned, we often walk past somebody, we kind of see somebody on the side of the road who looks maybe is vulnerable, but we just keep walking and we don't pay attention. Just like that, we see images, we suspect that they're not for real, we don't do anything about it, we just ignore it. Wouldn't it be great if we had a cyber hygiene practice that would allow us to report, send something to Margaret, say, hey, I saw this doesn't make sense. Why is this on the internet? I don't know, we don't have a way to do anything, right? We just blindly go past it, we ignore it, which is one of those practices, just like when you drive past somebody on the road on Aurora, you
No, it's not exactly.
So this is going to be a little shout out, I guess, to way to reports that we do seeing suspicions. We have the Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3, and you can write in complaints of that nature, and they would be our tops, and we can kind of actively look for each of those complaints. So that's a great segue into that. And then just maybe some more nuanced things that you might see that don't stand out as human trafficking that just might be indicators that this could be something that isn't maybe a bit suspicious. Things that just come to my mind would be unrealistic pay, like maybe, again, I'm thinking of examples of like an ad for like a hair or something like that, where you're going to be in that person's home. That's a very vulnerable place to be because maybe you don't know who your neighbors are, you don't have access to other people you can reach out to. That they're offering an exorbitant amount of money that would maybe not to match up with the work they're explaining that you would do. Maybe like vague explanations and not kind of specific things that the job would require. And then,
you could report that to the IC3?
Well, you could, I'm thinking of general things that in, advertising on social media that you might see that might be suspicious if you are announcing that. But I would say if you do see something that is, maybe you have a victim or you have, seen suspicious activity, you can absolutely report it to IC3. And it would be routed to whatever office, you're in.
The other thing I would say is there's always this conversation about what's federal and what's state. So FCC is one of those things that Federal Communications Commission. So a lot of those things as we're thinking, not only internationally and globally, but we're thinking from state to state, interstate, and intrastate. Those all come into play as we're thinking about whose job is it, whose role is it, what our systems are able to track, and how and who they track. So there's a huge thing right now about data and data sharing and data sources and people giving away their data. And there's a reason to collect it, but there's also a great fear of data being collected. And so Also, as I think about, where the gaps are, sometimes I have to figure those things out. But this is one of those areas that's a very difficult one to get on.
I can speak very loudly. So, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, would be a place for, could also be a place for report too.
Yeah, I was thinking of employers, they do that nationally. So that would be a particular place, I would say, to report suspicious trafficking in employers.
And then I always complain on, like, say, Facebook or YouTube or, whatever social platform you might be using, because that might deter them from posting more stuff. So that's what I can do.
I think we also had a question of some comments around AI. So the possibilities of AI for solutions.
This is an area where I've just been at 2 different national conferences with state legislators from 50 states, and both of them have focused on this as not only knowing where the pitfalls are and where the issues are, but also looking at how it is that we utilize it in the right way. And so I know enough to get in trouble and not enough to have solutions, but very clearly, we cannot run from that. We have to walk into it and think about how we use it in a way that it is a tool for good.
Also, any of you could offer some answers too. Besides the panelists, if someone has a thought or an answer, I think that would be great to hear from you, because I think it's a really good question. What about how does the gig economy relate to create vulnerabilities, exploitation, and takes advantage of people with regards that might lead to traffic people?
Well, and I haven't worked with, I think about, Rest and the folks that I work with that are organizations that are working with individuals that are in systems. And so for me, just to be very honest, I don't even profess to be any bit of an ounce of an expert. What I do profess to do is have an open door. And so solutions come from all of you. And so while there's bills that people pass, those ideas come from conversations like this, or people that follow up from conversations like this and said, I was in this room and you said you'd do this, can we talk? And my answer is always yes. And I think, it also has to fit in with the scope of my work, but if it doesn't fit for me, I can pass you on to someone where it does fit to try to figure that out. So I think, and I don't know how much of a service I'm going to do for you here, but I think one of those things is we do need to figure out who has the relationships and where those relationships sometimes can happen, and who are the ones that do have access to technology, and also that could perhaps be a safe person as well. If one needs to use technology and doesn't have access to it in order to get to safety, in order to find safety. So, yeah.
So one could also imagine, just like we used to have several years ago, we talked about frontline workers being the first responders to see a trafficked person. Maybe a gig worker might be a frontline person. So one thing could be outreach to gig workers, train them around recognizing when there might be a trafficked person in their midst, and to take them to safety, to provide safety for them. So it's a part of the economy that we haven't, I don't think, thought as a first contact. Anybody else have thoughts? Yes.
Thank you so much for this panel and for all the expertise and insight that you guys are sharing. My question has to do with sort of technological training. So for a little bit of context, I'm an incoming law student in the university, interested in serving survivors of trafficking and survivors of CSEC. And my background, like my educational background, is in the humanities. My prior work experience is in youth work, so I've done a lot of things around like trauma-informed work and like curriculum development. But I really lack like the understanding of like technology and the way technology develops. And I think it's really important to know that stuff to do work around trafficking. So I was just wondering if you have any like professional opportunities or trainings that you'd recommend for someone
working in this field? Like what someone, sort of with my experience, I imagine a lot of other people who work in social work and work as advocates, what should we know about like technology and what sort of skills should we be seeking to develop?
So I think the question is, how can she learn better about the role of technology in both creating vulnerabilities for possibilities of trafficking and preventing trafficking? Are there any programs that we know of, that anybody knows of in this room, and anybody here, that would help her get that training?
I have a scholar who's now a freshman at Stanford who wrote a bill on sex trafficking prevention, and when she was 12, she read a book and decided at 12 she was going to eradicate globally sex trafficking from this world. And she wrote, got a grant and wrote an open resource and came to me after I did my sex ed bill with the bill she'd written to integrate sex trafficking information, prevention, and awareness into middle school and 8th through 12th graders, because that was starting at 12 was the age that she knew was when our young people are most vulnerable. And part of it is to help scholars recognize signs and behaviors in others that may indicate also grooming someone in their own behaviors, but how it is that they take this into account. And I will say that it was unanimous bipartisan support off of both the floors, and it's now in full integration into at OSPI, and it's a free curriculum that you find on the OSPI website, and she is now trafficking it nationally, and I say that in the right way, and other states are picking it up because, again, young people and individuals just move from state to state. And so one scholar-created bill, one solution, but thinking about prevention. And then as we think about media literacy and digital citizenship, how she ties those two things in together.
There's so much great open source research that you can do on this. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a class or something. That's a wonderful example. But there's so much great, blogs and articles and things, and open source articles, open source being just, available on the internet if you want to get it. But things written by survivors as well. And there's a lot of really great survivor-led organizations that have great information too about how technology has affected their story and the future as well.
Unfortunately, with, say, adoption trafficking, it's an all-volunteer type of situation where everything is self-motivated and it's a learning experience that, if you have the motivation and you have all the questions, it's really self-learning. And my sister and I had established a group on social media where it's actually one of the largest adoptee-led organizations on social media. It's called Adoption, Truth, and Transparency Worldwide Information Network, but it's @twin for short. And most people, when they're impacted by, say, trafficking or anything traumatic, then they tend to just work at the problem themselves. And if there's, some sort of organization that would support and help, that's a fantastic thing. But in a lot of cases, it's just kind of self-motivated. There's not really much money in it. It's more volunteer-based learning.
Yeah, I can stand up. Senator, I wanted to ask you about this issue of your bill, 5572. So could you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's important for this conference.
So, 5572 was the bill that I talked about, and it was coming out of the recommendations around the implementing the recommendations of the Washington State Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And I did that in 1922. And the task force is a multi-jurisdictional group of agencies, and their whole focus is the dedication and protection of children from sexual abuse and from exploitation. And so they are tasked with reporting on an annual basis to the legislature recommendations that come out of their findings and their reports. So the one that I did would have closed the loopholes that were in the current law around sexual exploitation of minors in particular, taking photographs and photograph depictions of themselves, and it would have decriminalized that because they're currently, and the way the law is written, a young person could take a picture of themselves and transmit that electronically and be held liable and really have a criminal issue with that. And so, again, that was the bill we tried to do in 2022 and got it through the finish line in the Senate. But the House and the Senate have a little bit of different rules, and there was a House bill, but the Senate bill's title and the House bill's title are different, and so I could not get the Senate bill through the House. Anyway, it's more than you want to know. And so 23, 24, we redid the bill because 22, 23 was the end of the biennium, so we had to do a brand new bill and renumber it and then rename it. But again, the goal of the bill was the same, and that was to expand and enhance the protections to young people related to those things. And so last session, when it dropped, there was a House bill and a Senate bill, so I had a companion that was dropped by Representative Amy Whalen. And it was a short session, and they got into committee and in long justice in the Senate, and it didn't get out of committee. So the bill sits, and the bill will be brought back, I know, again. And, I'll just say, I just yesterday had a call from a national organization, same thing, talking about the digital literacy and media literacy and what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think, again, as we think about protection of young people, and that's what this is all about too. So we will continue. And again, the recommendations, if you just Google the Washington State Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, you can see some of the recommendations and reports that come out. And that's kind of what we try to take and make legislatively. That's the legislative nexus for me.
Thank you.
Just to share briefly, one of the initiatives of cyber scam survivor from the Philippines after she was rescued. She was working in a call center before, was to mobilize her colleagues in the call center and form themselves as the cyber warriors. So currently there are like 300 of them, but they do this on top of what because they have full-time jobs. And so what they do is to scan the Facebook and flag, suspicious postings for job ads. But that's very delicious. But I was just thinking that would be like a very tedious job to do, like looking at the Facebook and the postings. And then they partner with Meta so that this will be taken down. But who knows? They can always like create another account and post. So I don't know if there is a more efficient way to do this because it's technology anyway. But I'm not into technology, so I wanted to ask.
Well, I'm guessing probably there is a way to do that with AI, Python coding or something like that. But of course, you always have to have a human look at some of those cases, but whether to adjudicate maybe whether or not it's the right model for scraping Facebook. But I think there was one comment question in the back, and then I think we'll have to, we probably should wrap it up.
Yeah, so one thing I'm really passionate about through my work with survivors is primarily when I say judicial, judges, education. And I guess I'm wondering from your experiences, all of your varied experiences, especially when it comes to technology, I run into a fair amount of judges who really just don't understand the ins and outs of technology and how it's utilized to perpetrate a multitude of acts of abuse. and continuous harassment for survivors. And I'm just wondering, I guess just so I can articulate this question, as folks who have experience both with social media and particularly with law enforcement and executive judges and so on, what have you found to be the best ways to actually open these lines of communication with judges so we can educate them on where are the gaps coming from in your experience, what needs to be done to either build that relationship or build that bridge for understanding, because I know I've been a lot of places and haven't been. Any would be great, very helpful.
Okay, I'm going to collect a couple of comments, get those questions, comments, and then we'll turn to the panelists for some final thoughts.
Hello, I just had a quick question. I was just curious to know how much or how many resources the FBI is allocating towards kind of weeding out I guess fraudulent or the fake posts on Facebook that you see, or if they have the resources to allocate to that issue. I work at the Genesis Project Seattle, and we see a lot of the women that we work with who are in sex trafficking, posting and kind of using social media as a way to get clients, right? So I was wondering if the FBI looks into those cases or has a task force dedicated to that at all. I was just curious about kind of how many people or what resources you have allocated to that issue.
Go ahead. Yeah. Please.
Well,
Yes.
do you want to respond to that question?
No, I'm
Or
just
shall I
going
ask?
to collect a few questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a global educator. I've been involved in global education. And in the most, internet use and access, particularly children's access to the internet is just prolific globally. My concern is that particularly in lower income, more vulnerable communities, countries, have access to technology. And the poverty, technology is so accessible, and it's readily used. People have phones, even the poorest communities have a phone. And I'm just wondering, is there any body, any organization, is the government or governments, is there a movement, any kind of legal work, or entity that is regulating vulnerable use, children having access to these sites in very vulnerable communities? They're vulnerable, and they're even more vulnerable with access to technology to sex trafficking. And I don't know if there's any, it's a bit like the dating apps. There seems to be no regulation, nothing there. And it concerns me even greater for children in very poor countries who happen to have access to phones and things. Is there any regulation to ensure that these precious children who are already struggling with poverty are not being dragged in through technology into sex trafficking?
I think that's a good question. So we have three things you might respond to. One is education for legal, judiciary, legal folks about the risks associated with internet and sex trafficking and technology. Probably I would add to that legislators, education for legislators. And the second question had to do whether the FBI has a way of enforcing or investigating people who are selling sex online and are trafficking them, either themselves or being trafficked by somebody. And then the third is what about internet governance? Who's doing that, especially the needs of very vulnerable populations, whether they're in the U.S. or in low and middle income countries? Yeah. Okay. Those are three big questions.
Okay, so I'll take the second one. So I have my boss here, so if you're able to kind of up through something else. But he's the one who really knows things. But I would say in terms of kind of how we work, we investigate instances of forced fraud and coercion, towards victims. So while that is sometimes we do see, say, pimps or sex traffickers operating on social media, maybe that's how they are identifying a victim and they're still that victim. So we absolutely do work those cases for sure. We don't have a mechanism to enforce social media companies to do things. That's a separate company. That would be more in the policy kind of realm. That's not my space at all. But we do, we have a lot of cases that involve social media, of course, because again, a lot of the victims have social media, a lot of the victims, and that's what really use social media heavily. And so it's difficult because it's not inherently bad. Like the use of social media is, we all use it all the time. So it's tricky, but when we do see those instances of forced fraud and coercion being used, that's what we would investigate.
I would address the issue around education and what we're doing with our young children, and in particular how we're supporting families and understanding the digital world, which changes like on a daily basis. And we have 296 school districts in the state, and each have local school boards. So a lot of the work and the things that haven't happened at a local level. We spend a lot of time talking about digital divide and digital equity. So a lot of the work we've been doing is trying to get digital media out to communities and to individuals, and at the same time we're having a conversation about that can be good, that can be not so good. I know in my own district we have parent academies, and we're one of the most diverse school districts in the state. And so we do that in language communities where families come together with other parents and learn about, and social emotional, right now, and mental health, behavioral health is hugely important. And again, it ties right into this as we think about kids' access and what it does to their heads and their hearts. So that's one way that we're, I know locally that we're trying to deal with it. We have two different bills that we tried to get through that did not pass, that I think will probably come back again, and one is around media literacy and digital citizenship and literacy education, and that's for K-12 scholars. And then the other one is around library science and IT and digital literacy for librarians and for school staff across our state. Again, connections with scholars and connections with families and trying to figure out how we help them. But we also have the internet, which is taking over and caring for a lot of kids who come home and don't have places to be and places to go. So I would also put a shout out for programming for young people, so that they actually have something to do with their hands and their bodies as opposed to just being on an instrument. And that is lacking, and it has nothing to do with technology and everything to do with kind of getting back into finding kids other things that they could be doing. So that's what I would say.
The group that my sister and I started, it's mostly a peer support group. So everybody comes from a different walk of life. We have people who are civil servants of the European Commission to the janitor down the street. It's just of the people, by the people, for the people who are most impacted by adoption. So we kind of, if we see something where a child looks like they're being sold online, or we did a post that looks like they're trying to sell children into the group, then we will, like for instance, we have a civil who is the founder of Against Child Trafficking in the Netherlands. And so we will report it to her. I've reported things to Lisa Lee. We all just use our own resources to report. And it's just the people doing whatever we feel like is the best thing to do at the moment.
Okay, we are at the end. I thought I would offer a few remarks, and I want to thank our panelists. First of all, thank you for opening our eyes to a number of very disturbing ways in which the internet is being used to exploit people, and also some possible ways in which we could try to make a difference. One of the things that I think is really important here is something that has been echoed a couple times throughout today, which is that we still have a lot of proactive work that we need to do in educating our in various institutions, whether there are universities, whether they are our legislators, whether they are law enforcement. I think there's open doors in all of those places, as we've seen, but we do have to bring to them both the challenges that we're seeing and explaining to them how it's happening and teaching them about the internet and the role of technology as both disruptor for negative outcomes and possibly a disruptor for positive outcomes. That is, are there places on the internet where we could do some more frontline work and find people who are being trafficked? And are there ways in which we could hold internet companies, in particular, accountable for the content that's on them through internet governance, through federal legislation, etc. I know that there has been attempts in the U.S. Congress to do something like that, and they are running into this issue of a very powerful set of interests that are making the case for not regulating the internet and not regulating social media companies. And I think it's I'm afraid to say
It is regulated.
Us to explain why and what the negative consequences are right now to do so. But again, thank you all. What an amazing day. Thank you to the Women's Center, and thank you to our panelists.